Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this Zelda 40th anniversary rumor just got more interesting. So in yesterday's video I talked about a variety of things surrounding Zelda's 40th anniversary, and one of them had to do with this new Zelda themed Switch 2 Pro controller that at first was pitched to be an Ocarina of Time based Pro controller. But we have gotten more clarification from others about this controller and more, and these things do have big implications for how Nintendo will be handling Zelda's 40th anniversary. So that's what I want to dive even further into today. Now before getting into it all though, let me remind you all, I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers. We're getting so close. I'm hoping to hit this goal soon, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. So yesterday, Mike Odyssey on Twitter said a Zelda Ocarina of Time Pro controller might be coming instead of a themed Nintendo Switch 2. Bookmark this. Now, the reason Mike Odyssey said it in this way is because we've heard from Special Nick, who has shown to have a very good track record when it comes to Nintendo things he's heard, that there is supposed to be a Zelda-themed Switch 2 coming out alongside the Ocarina of Time remake. And so Mike Odyssey here is indicating that this Pro controller would be coming out instead of a Switch 2 themed console on Zelda. And the way this is being worded, it's being suggested this Pro controller would be themed off Ocarina of Time specifically and not just the overall Zelda series. And this would have some pretty big implications because this would suggest that you're just focusing on celebrating Ocarina of Time and not so much the entire Zelda series, which could mean Nintendo doesn't necessarily have bigger Zelda 40th anniversary plans and they're just focusing on Ocarina of Time to celebrate the anniversary. Like, you look at how Nintendo handled Mario's 40th anniversary, it wasn't just about Mario Galaxy, it was about various Mario things. Now, Mario Galaxy was clearly a big focus, but the hope has been that for Zelda's 40th anniversary, unlike prior Zelda anniversaries where we just see maybe like a focus on one game like with Skyward Sword for the 25th, we actually see an overall celebration of the series. Like maybe we actually have a Nintendo Direct where they announce a variety of things, like concerts, merchandise lines, they show us the movie, yes, Ocarina of Time, yes, a bundle of some kind with a new Pro controller, and perhaps a few other smaller Zelda game releases as well, or inclusions in different things, like maybe they announce Link and Princess Zelda in Mario Kart World, for example. That could be pretty cool. There's a lot of little things they could do like that. But it was not just Mike Odyssey that talked about this Pro controller. Necrofelipe from Universal Nintendo also said, he's right, and I've already seen the design, this is the teaser for Nintendo deals. And then when you scroll down, he describes what he has heard. Green at the tips, similar to that of Splatoon, with gold, the Triforce crest centered between the buttons minus and plus. Note, I don't know if there are or aren't themed consoles in the plans, but I know the existence of the themed Pro controller. Interesting. So that was what was covered yesterday. However, there was an update on this. Necrofelipe, correction. Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller, the Legend of Zelda 40th Anniversary Edition. This is apparently the actual name of the controller, a literal 40th anniversary edition for a Switch 2 Pro controller having to do with The Legend of Zelda. That's extremely interesting, and as he says here, it is not a themed controller tied to Ocarina of Time. And so this would have some very big implications. This would be suggestive that they actually have a big 40th anniversary campaign planned. Now continuing down this thread, Special Nick, who is the original source for this rumor regarding a Switch 2 themed system for Zelda's 40th anniversary coming out alongside Ocarina of Time, here he says, yeah, both the controller and console are Zelda themed, not necessarily Ocarina. And this is a big detail, so here's the clarification, it's not Ocarina of Time based, this Pro controller, nor is the console, and Special Nick is saying that it is both, and actually I have a little bit more from him here. So this person has said, along with a Zelda Ocarina of Time Special Edition for Switch 2, dock, Joy-Cons, and Pro controller for sure, all the merch. Special Nick says, yes, I was told we are getting a Zelda-themed console and Pro controller, not necessarily Ocarina of Time though. So Nick isn't saying with 100% certainty that it isn't Ocarina of Time based, he's just saying he's heard it's Zelda-themed. So maybe it could have something to do with Ocarina of Time, but he's just hearing it's Zelda-themed. And going back to what Necrofelipe said, how he actually has a name for the Pro controller where it's literally called a 40th Anniversary Edition, this is suggestive that has more to do than just Ocarina of Time here. And so yes, the big implication is that not only are we going to be getting a Pro controller and a special themed Switch 2 for Zelda's anniversary, but there's going to be a focus on Zelda's 40th anniversary as opposed to just Ocarina of Time, so that does mean more is going to be shown, you'd imagine, relatively soon. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper on that, but before doing so, here's a brief message. I'm not really a jewelry or bling kind of guy, but I do like to look good, and I am a big fan of so many different games. So when King Ice, the sponsor for today's video, sent over these awesome necklaces, I had to take a look. As you see here with Sonic the Hedgehog and friends, there are hundreds of hand-set, brilliant cut stones. The level of detail here is just incredible, and it's beautiful. From all different angles, it's completely iced out. And all the gold, it's real 14K gold plating. And these are all officially licensed by Sega. There's even this nice Sega stamp on the back, so you know it's official. And then you have these custom boxes that they come in, with the Sonic logo in gold-colored foil. There's a really nice premium and refined look to these boxes. These are collector's items with great attention to detail that's true to the character's look and feel, and they're only available at kingice.com. But King Ice is responsible for so many other different designs and collaborations. As you see here, I'm scrolling through, there are so many different companies involved. Yu-Gi-Oh!, Persona, and so much more. So make sure to check it all out with the link in the description below using my promo code COLDESTRESTART. This is something I touched on a bit yesterday, but I'll just say, there are people that are growing concerned that Nintendo would even be celebrating Zelda's 40th anniversary in a big way, because if you look at the history of things, Nintendo typically actually starts to celebrate Zelda's 40th anniversary around June. People were actually concerned earlier this year when February came and went and there was no mention of Zelda's anniversary, because technically, the first Zelda, Zelda 1 that came up for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1986, released into February, and so people were thinking that when February came around, we'd hear something from Nintendo. But for the most part, Nintendo doesn't really announce things around this time having to do with Zelda. When do they? Usually in June, and we did actually get a huge announcement. We got the announcement of the Ocarina of Time remake coming out for Nintendo Switch 2 later this year. This alone, to me, I would say is a very big deal, and alone is highly celebratory of Zelda's 40th anniversary. But I'll also mention, we do have the Ocarina of Time Lego set that was announced earlier this year, and we now also have the recently announced Hasbro line, and we've even seen some new figurines that are coming out that have to do with Tears of the Kingdom, but more is promised, more is coming. It's not just about Tears of the Kingdom. The way it's even being branded is being branded as just Zelda and not Tears of the Kingdom, and of course, we also know that the live-action Zelda movie is coming out next year, towards the end of April, and they're gonna have to start marketing that this year, which of course would make sense to feature as part of Zelda's 40th anniversary, but we've gone through June, there's been no official announcement yet, and people are growing concerned. And there's also this big question that's been looming as to when Nintendo will show us the Ocarina of Time remake again. Because that teaser in June was very light, very short, barely gave us a taste in terms of what we should be expecting here. And it's interesting because another big talking point around this game is just how ambitious it is. Nintendo hasn't really clarified on that yet. I would argue, and have been arguing, that they have at least been indicating that this is a very big deal kind of remake, more than your typical kind of remake, because across the board, the marketing has been reborn. Literally within the words of the Nintendo Direct, yes, on social media tweets, but beyond that, it's not just one single tweet like they did with Skyward Sword, which I know some people were mentioning. It's like, oh, see, they mentioned reborn in one single tweet, so that means nothing about this. No, that's just one person who had decided to word that tweet in one way, one time, when the messaging across the board, not just within the Nintendo Direct, not just within the tweets about the game, but also within the website, within the metadata, and even with this recent magazine thing where we've seen this new slogan for the game, Reborn Across Time, that is showing a consistent message here. So when you think about that, the game being reborn, them not really referring to it as just a remake, and just looking at the details we've seen from the teaser trailer, the redesigns, the restructuring of Link's room and all that, to me it's pretty clear this is more than just a typical remake. And if it was just a typical remake, Nintendo probably would have said that already. They haven't. Point is though, while I'm making that argument, we do not know for sure. And so we are wondering about when they're going to show off this game so we can learn more. And if it is a bigger deal, you would think Nintendo would want to show it off with a healthy amount of room before it actually comes out. But then when we also have the Zelda 40th anniversary thing, and now we have more evidence to suggest that it is an actual thing and not just Ocarina of Time itself, when do they show these things? There was that recent interesting GameStop listing that was suggesting pre-orders would open up for Ocarina of Time on August 4th. People are claiming that it was some sort of weird AI mistake. That may be. There's no guarantee that a listing from GameStop would 100% indicate when pre-orders would open up, but if there's anything to that, if pre-orders are going to be opening up August 4th, it would be suggestive that bigger news would be coming soon. I will say this though, and there is a rumor coming from Nash Weedle, whether you choose to trust him or not, he has gotten many things right, not everything, that he has heard from a source he's confident in that we won't be seeing Ocarina of Time Remake until September. And I was just considering something here. I looked back to when we got the announcement of the Tears of the Kingdom OLED, and that was announced at the same time as the Tears of the Kingdom demonstration. And it wasn't just the announcement of the Tears of the Kingdom OLED edition, but also a Switch 1 Pro controller for Tears of the Kingdom. This was all announced on March 28th, the game came out on May 12th, there was a month-and-a-half window there. And what I remember from that time is that we all were very eager to learn more about Tears of the Kingdom. Nintendo was being extremely quiet about the game. We had to wait until late March to actually start getting some meaty, significant details about this game. There were a couple teasers, there were a couple trailers, but they were all fairly light. Could Nintendo be handling things in a very similar way, where a month and a half before release, that's where they're really going to start diving into things? And could this also be when they announce this special Zelda-themed Switch 2 and Pro controller, which would time things up, I believe, probably around September if we're assuming that Zelda comes out in November, as it usually does when there is a big release planned for the holidays. Timing-wise, things check out here, and it's also a reminder that Nintendo does have a history of announcing both a controller and themed console, not just one of them, for a special release like Zelda. But there's something about this that I'm not sure on, and maybe I'm just in my head about this. I'm curious about what you guys think, so please let me know in the comments below here. But when I continue to think about this, when I think about, okay, they're going to have a Switch 2 Pro controller supposedly, and a themed console to announce. And of course, they have to showcase this Ocarina of Time remake, and from what we understand, or at least from what we're surmising here, it's going to be a pretty ambitious remake here with some reimagined elements. In other words, more ambitious than even the Star Fox remake, which had its own dedicated direct. This is going to be the biggest game of the year from Nintendo, releasing probably in November, but then there's also all the other 40th anniversary things they need to talk about, like concerts, merchandising, perhaps other smaller releases. The live-action Zelda movie needs its own trailer as well. If that's all going to be included as a part of Zelda's 40th anniversary, sure, maybe that's all one giant Zelda 40th anniversary direct. That would be great, but there's also an issue with that. The issue being, there are other Nintendo things to discuss, like the Dust Bloods, Switch Sports Resort, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. These are other releases, and could there be more? We've talked about how when you consider the quantity of things in comparison to other years, it's looking pretty light right now. And so perhaps that could be suggestive that Nintendo may have another announcement or two they may want to pull out of their sleeves to come out this year. We've talked about how Nintendo's actually shown the ability to have some really quick turnarounds, to shadow drop things, to have surprise announcements. I mean, you look at Star Fox as one of the most recent ones. They could do something like that again to help fill up the year, which again, if they were to do something like that, that's another thing as a part of Nintendo's marketing they have to factor in that can get in the way or could be overshadowed by all the Zelda stuff. So I'm just kind of left thinking that some of this stuff has to be spaced out here. I think the idea of us waiting all the way until September to get all the Zelda anniversary announcements and information, I just wonder if maybe they're going to handle things a bit differently. Maybe they could address all the other things beforehand or separately, and it's just a dedicated direct. Maybe I'm putting too much stock into this idea, or maybe they'll just wait on telling us more about the live-action Zelda movie for a separate event later into the year. That's also a possibility. I think if they were to do that, it would be a bit more reasonable, at least in my mind. But it just seems like there's still so much to talk about here, and I'm just skeptical that we're going to have to wait until September to get literally all of it in one place. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.